Today, Joey, I'm so excited that we get a chance to review a book. This may be the first book that we've truly reviewed on our podcast. So that tells you how powerful this book is and what it's meant to our outlook on this year and also the things that we're going to do going forward, right?
That's right. I mean, Weldon Long's book, The Power of Consistency, it's really inspired me. I don't remember the last time I heard someone's story and was just challenged. I mean, this hardcore. I mean, the guy was in dire straits.
He was in prison, man.
I mean, if anybody's circumstances are worse, show me.
Yeah.
Because he went from that situation to 7 years. So 7 years after that, he launches a company. And 3 years after that, it's named in, what was it, Inc. 500?
Yeah, it's in the Inc. magazine for one of the fastest growing businesses in America. But just to think back where he came from. The guy was a dropout from high school, 3-time convicted criminal, deserted his family, had a young son who had really never seen him. And all of a sudden he's sitting there in prison staring at the mirror at himself. His dad, I can't remember if his dad died at that moment. I think that's what had happened.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering right. And just said, this just can't be my life, right? And through reading, educating, which we love, right? It's just the idea of just learning. He got into Stephen Covey's books. He got into Tony Robbins' books. And he started saying, you know what? This is not going to be my life. Even though I've got 7 more years in this prison, I'm going to find a way to be successful. He measured success in several ways, but one, it was going to be, I'm going to be a great father, which for him had never even really dealt with the son at all. That was a pretty crazy thing.
That's right. And how he overcame, again, his circumstances staring him in the face every day in that tiny cell to create the life that he really wanted. It was just totally inspiring.
And for us, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we're fighting. We're fighting constantly. Our situation obviously pales in comparison to sitting in like a 6x8 concrete cell, right? That's not our situation, but sometimes we get defeated in our emotions and what's going on in the work and the stress of trying to balance life and trying to keep up with all the, the opportunities that are coming our way. And that's why this book, I felt like, is just perfect timing because we're sitting here in January. We've got ideas for what we want to do for the year. And there's some really good nuggets that we're going to break down.
Yeah, no doubt. He gets rid of the excuses that you and I and all entrepreneurs face every day.
All right. Let's get into you guys are going to love today's episode.
Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Muré.
All right, Russ. So picture this. I'm in 5th grade. I'm dressed out in my white baseball pants and striped shirt. I'm sitting in the dugout, and all of a sudden, all the kids around me, all the teammates, they're looking around, and I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, sitting on the dugout bench, waiting for my turn to hit. And I'm just embarrassed. This is the first time I'm sitting there after talking to my dad, who said, Joey, before you go and hit, and you need to envision yourself hitting the ball.
Oh, now, is he coming to you with this idea like you'd had a bad practice run before you got to, is this like the first game of the season he's talking to you?
No, I really don't remember why he brought this to my attention. It wasn't like I was a terrible player or anything like that, but I wasn't like amazing. Okay. Right. And for some reason, I guess he had read a book or heard something on TV or whatever it was. And he brought it to me, he said, Joey, you need to envision yourself making contact, hitting the ball where it's going to go and getting on that base. Envision yourself on first base, on second base, whatever it might be. And I was like, this is kooky. Like, I don't know why I'm going to do this, but I'll try it. My dad's telling me to do it. So I do that in the dugout. I go out on the on-deck circle. I'm waiting for my turn to hit. Close my eyes. I'm seeing myself hitting the ball. I know the parents are probably looking at me from my back, and I'm embarrassed, but I'm like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it.
I mean, there's all sort of like little rituals that baseball players do. I mean, they're like rubbing bats together, like clicking their heels. I mean, you can like unstrapping their batting gloves and stuff like that. So this is your ritual. You're going up there and you're closing your eyes in the on deck circle.
And I stand up to the plate and I make contact. I get on base. And then the next at bat, I do the same thing. Same thing happens.
You're like, Dad, this is working.
I mean, this is unbelievable. But the most impactful part of this was we end the season. Our team does really well. I don't remember if we were champions of that season or whatever it was, but we're all getting our trophies. And then there's a special trophy that they had made for me because I had batted 1,000.
What?
That season, in particular, my 5th grade year.
1,000.
And now, granted, this is Little League, but it's not coach pitch.
You didn't get out not one single time.
Not one time. I got on base every at bat that I
that
stood
is
up there.
Nuts. I don't know if I believe that, man. That's so good.
You used to play baseball, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I play baseball. I can tell you though, I was not going to bat 1,000.
Well, I share that story with you because one, I had to dig it out of the trenches there. I don't even hardly remember it, but as we were reading this book, we mentioned The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. It just dawned on me what I was doing at that point. I was putting good things in my box, right?
Ah, man, you were telling yourself that I'm a good hitter, and you were envisioning where you were hitting the ball. So you were putting those thoughts, not the fear and negativity sometimes that goes in our brain, right?
That's right.
We face that. That happens. And also other people put stuff in our brain. That's not what happened to little Joey. The Italian Stallion became the Louisville Slugger, man. That's so awesome. You've made me so jealous because I wanted to be a baseball player. That's everything that ever I did when I was little had revolved around baseball. I walked around with a ball in my hand. I mean, that was just my thing. And now again, you're crushing me with another accolade that I don't have.
Well,
batting 1,000.
And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a great story. I'm grateful to share it with y'all, but it's all about this book. I mean, this book is teaching you, and I shared this as a precursor to the last episode, but Weldon Long says, whatever you're putting in that box has to come out. It's impossible. He gives this example. If you have a box full of motorcycle parts,
right?
You start pulling those parts out and you start putting them together, it's impossible. In fact, he puts it as a question. He said, what's the likelihood that once you get done putting those parts together that you've accidentally baked a cake?
Right? That'd be pretty hard, right?
It ain't going to happen, right? I mean, this is such a great picture. What we're putting in as entrepreneurs, what are we putting in to our box? What are we believing about our business?
Are we believing our business is going to be successful? Are we believing that people want to do business with us? Are we believing that we can grow this business exponentially? Or are we limiting that?
And then even more so, I mean, we talked about the struggle of balance, right? Am I a good father? Am I a good husband? And what are you saying to yourself about those things?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a hard part, right? It's the head trash sometimes gets in our way. We create some of those limiting beliefs, and we can make those things become reality if we're not careful. You're a great example of your 5th grade year of showing how you can make the idea of what I'm going to do, envision it, and making it happen on the positive side. But you can see all sort of examples where people have said, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to do this. And they put themselves in a position where, I'm not smart enough. I mean, Weldon Long talked about in his book, the only way that I can get ahead, he said that his dad always put in his idea that rich people were crooks. Right. The only way that they were ever rich is because they had stolen something. So in his mind, stealing and other things like that was par for the course.
Yeah. Why would he even reach to become rich if he didn't want to be a crook? It's like those things are counterintuitive to each other.
Yeah. So the idea of this book being the power of consistency, it's not all based upon just putting good ideas in your head, because I will admit that seems a little kooky to me at first, because you and I mean, how many years ago was that where we had Michael Muré, the author of 7 Levels, which he had wrote a book that was like #1 on Amazon for a long time. We were like on his board of directors to bring him here to Birmingham to share with hundreds of people, other business people, about how to be successful and how to pass along the idea of the reciprocity generation, right? The idea of giving and not just trying to receive. He talked about these affirmations. And you and I were kind of like, man, I'm not certain about that. That's not really what I'm in. But in this book by Weldon Long, The Power of Consistency, is about doing things consistently right and also having your brain focus on what's important, right? Because we can get so distracted. We can fill our brains with shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
I will say that I've fallen, squirrel, right? I get distracted pretty quickly. And the idea of following the new idea or trying to apply something that I just learned immediately without really researching and having a good understanding of it, that sometimes can hit me. I love his concepts of envisioning what you want and then setting forth those actions.
Right. I mean, he makes the point, and really we believe this too. That's why we want to share this book with you guys today, is that really we don't want to continue to feel broken and defeated by not meeting our goals year after year. Right. Yeah. I mean, how many times you're sitting there as an entrepreneur and you've set these big goals, but then by the third or fourth week in January, you're not even on track because you haven't done the daily disciplines, right? The consistent things you should do.
Right.
So then you start feeling defeated, right?
Well, you can. I mean, that makes me think of this may be a movie prior to you, Joey, and probably a little dated on myself, but I have seen it. I've seen it several times. Cool Hand Luke, the Paul Newman movie. Yeah. And one of the scenes in there just resonates with me as it relates to this exact concept. The idea of starting something and then having to stop, and then starting something and stop, starting something and stop. And in the Cool Hand Luke movie, it was him having to dig out a hole and then another guard making him fill it back up and over and over and over again, which really was just trying to break his will, right? And we experience that as it relates as business owners to goals. Sometimes we set these goals, we have these ambitions, we're going to do this. And then, like you said, 3 or 4 weeks in, we've gotten distracted and we're off our goals, and we look back and we go, I guess there's always next year.
Yeah.
That's really kind of what we want to do in today's episode, is to say, yeah, it may be at the very beginning of February when you're listening to this, but you don't have to feel defeated. We have plans and processes just from ideas in this book that we can apply and do. But just know, I have struggled in the past getting distracted.
Oh, we're failing forward along with all of our listeners right now, I promise you. So at this point, he does lay out the plan, right? And so I want to kind of get into that and be honest with you, Russ. I hope Weldon gets news of this podcast and he wants to join us for another one.
Oh, I guarantee you, there's somebody listening today who's ever met Weldon Long or who may be going to one of his public workshops, because he's a nationally known speaker. He speaks in engagements all over the place. If you run into him, I want you to say, hey, by the way, did you know about the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast? I was listening through these guys talk about these things, which what made me so interested in your talk. I want to get him on the show because I would love, Joey, I'd love to hear some of these stories.
We're going to go ahead and say it right now. Weldon Long will be on the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. That's our affirmation?
Exactly. I love it.
All right, we're going to make it happen. Now, okay, so let's get to the very practical part. He talks about in the book a process. He says, you need to lay out what you want.
Got to have a vision.
Yeah. What do you want? Okay, so that may be a dollar figure. It may be amount in the bank. It may be an income goal. It may be a units goal. It may be
a family size.
Yeah, exactly. But he says that's not the end, right? That is not necessarily the end. If I want, let's say, a $300,000 income, what is the purpose of that? What's really the why behind it? Like, you want to share the story of the guy that wants to write the book.
Yeah. Well, in the book, he gave an example of a guy who came up to him after a workshop and having heard him speak and having written several books. This is the Power of Consistency is the second book that he wrote. I think the first one was The Upside of Fear.
That's right.
And a guy came up to him afterwards and said, you've inspired me. I want to write a book. You've just motivated me so much. And he said, really? That's pretty interesting. Well, why do you want to write a book? What's your passion?
And he says, I've learned all these different things and I really want to share it with people. I want to share people with my experiences.
All right. So you want to share your experiences? So are you wanting to leave like a legacy or something? He asked him.
And he's like, actually, now that you say it, yeah, that's what I want to do.
A legacy. So it wasn't the book, right? That was the motivation. It was leaving something. It was leaving a legacy behind, which I know just a couple episodes we talked about that, which
That's right.
we understand that value, but just through kind of disseminating through some of that process, he understood that really legacy was what his motivation was, which is so much more important than just writing a book. Because it's so easy to say, I want to make X dollars, I want my business to grow to this size or whatever. But if you don't have something really passionate that you can attach to that goal, it's a good chance you're probably not going to make it.
That's right. So he doesn't leave it at what do I want? He says, who do I want to become? That's the next question. So this has to do with all the different roles in your life, right? If I am a father, what kind of father do I want to become?
What kind of husband or spouse do I want to be?
That's right. What kind of a leader do I want to be? What kind of a contributor to society or to my community? And that's actually the next question. He says, what do I want to contribute? So it's not all inward, self-focused. It's what do I have to give?
Yeah.
Like take an inventory.
Well, whenever he actually got Tony Robbins to endorse his book, it was about him. One of the Tony Robbins statements to him was his contribution now.
That's right.
That was what was so motivating to him, is the idea that Tony Robbins was acknowledging now his contribution, which is pretty powerful, because that's really when it goes into it. What is it that we're going to contribute to others? We talked about a second ago, a book that was based upon reciprocity, about giving.
That's right. And then from there, you take those questions that drive kind of your motivations and these type of things, and they also drive your affirmations to yourself. And I'll tell you from my personal experience of going through this, it started to reveal to me what my limiting beliefs were.
What you thought that you couldn't do?
Yeah. So for instance, I'm going to share with you a couple of them that I had. So under husband, I said, I am patient and kind and thoughtful. That's one of the things that I want to tell myself every day. And you know why I said that is because I believe that I'm not thoughtful. That's one of the things that in my back of my mind, I'm like, well, I'm just not that thoughtful.
Bro, if you're not thoughtful, then I don't know what I am. Because I can remember riding back on the airplane a day before my anniversary and asking you, hey, by the way, what should I do for my wife? And you came up with it. You helped me really think through an awesome anniversary opportunity that we played out. But
what I'm saying is, as you start going through these, you start taking inventory of what's the head trash, right? I probably am very thoughtful, but I'm telling myself the opposite. So
you're starting to believe that you're not because of that.
Right.
So I guess what you're saying is that you're writing out some things that are telling yourself the opposite?
Yeah, absolutely. So under father, I'm talking about I make my daughters feel safe and cared for. Okay? So that is something that I want them to experience when they're around me. That's who I want to become. So that's driving me. It's so great to go through this. So anyways, we don't have time to go through the entire book with you. We just want to kind of outline some of our favorite parts. We're going to have Weldon Long on the show.
We're going to have
share
Weldon
his
Long,
experience.
no doubt.
But in the meantime, you need to get a copy of his book.
I encourage you. We're going to put that in the show notes. We'll put a link to the book, The Power of Consistency, there in the show notes. So go to www.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. This is episode 19, and you're going to be able to get a link to that book, because I really believe that as an entrepreneur, you're going to value this as much as we have, as we've been going through this and just talking back and forth. And we're like, man, we've got to do an episode on it, because the habits, that's what you're talking about. What you've been doing is creating habits. But one of the things I love about this book that he outlined in here, it's not just habits, right? It's not just, I'm trying to go through this. I'm not going to eat sweets. I'm not going to eat breads. Well, I'm trying to work on willpower alone, and that's tough. He gave an example of some college students that went through this research project. They were given two things to resist. One group was given cookies to resist. Another group was given radishes to resist. I'm like, is that really a resistance? But the part of the experiment was in the room, they were able to eat the other thing, right? So you would imagine the person who had to resist the cookies had to experience a lot more exhaustion on that willpower.
Oh, yeah.
And what they did is the experiment was partly just to see who would eat and who wouldn't. But then the second part of the experiment is when they walked out of that room, then they were given something else that they had to resist. Well, the people who had been resisting cookies, when they went into the next temptation,
they were spent.
They started folding quickly. versus the person who was just eating cookies and had to resist, radishes. They were able to hold out much longer. And he illustrates that in the book is that we can't work on willpower alone. We have to set our mind and focus on stuff. And I've said this before, I think in previous episodes, but I shared this with my daughter last night, is that when you ride around, you notice your car and other people driving it. And it's because your brain said, that's important to me. And so it just starts identifying it. I mean, you're riding down the road, you're seeing cars all the time. Your brain's not saying, by the way, look at that. Look at that Audi, or look at that Volkswagen, or look at that Chevrolet. It doesn't do that. But if it's your car, it says, look at that. That's my car. Oh, great. There's my car. Well, that happens with investments and opportunities and other things, but it also happens with things that we tell ourselves in our mind. Hey, I want to be a caring father. I want to be a thoughtful and patient husband. I guarantee you're going to start seeing others out there that you're going to go, that dude's patient.
Yeah, just opportunities and models and examples that maybe I didn't see before.
You're going to start identifying it. And you're probably even going to start complimenting people on it. And it's going to become a part of your process. Well, the same thing can be true in our businesses. The same thing can be true in our finances. Whatever it is, if we tell our brain this is important and we put something in front of us, that vision, it will create a habit, not just from habit alone, not from willpower, but that our brain now is working in that subconscious setting for us.
Right. And just as a kind of a bonus, again, this is not a Weldon Long tool. So don't, I'm going to share with you on our show notes, just a thing I'm calling the roles and goals guide. So it's a way that you can go through those questions that we mentioned. If you didn't have time to write them down, you can go to the show notes and download this, and it will walk you through each of those different roles that you may have some that I don't, and vice versa, but it'll walk you through those and what questions you need to ask yourself so that you can build your own plan and then implement it every day.
You can just write it down right on actually the roles and goals sheet right there.
That's
so you don't even have to go through and write it, because I'm terrible. I tell you, if you give me something, give me a recipe. People are like, I didn't know you could cook. I'm like, well, if you tell me, you give me all the ingredients and everything, I can follow a recipe. But I'm not very creative. I'm not someone who can just create something out of thin air. But this is a perfect thing for you.
Right.
If you just want something to follow and you're like, man, I would love the idea of knowing what I want to contribute, what I want to become, and applying it to different aspects of my life. You've done a great job of already outlining that and giving this away for free. That's pretty cool, man. That's awesome.
And I hope you get a lot of benefit out of it. I mean, really our goal and our hope is that you don't live under the weight that so many entrepreneurs live under, right? That weight that, I'm just not performing.
Not meeting up to the expectations of whatever.
I'm limited by my beliefs. Like we wouldn't even say that, but that's what we're living under. And then we want to get you to a point where you're free to contribute, right? That's kind of the goal of this, why we're sharing this today.
You're reaching that potential, right? You're doing those things. I mean, already as an entrepreneur, you're awesome. You've already created something. And the last thing you should do is limit that through head trash. And the idea of starting to tell yourself these little things, following some of these little basic principles that Weldon is listing out from this book. And I just think it's just awesome that you could start out your year or finish your year and make it a completely new start. Make it one of those things, because everybody wants to create goals, but the idea of actually fulfilling those is where we start measuring. And that's so awesome that this is something that I know you and I are going to get a lot out of this year.
That's right. One last thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up, and that is just a story I told you about Annie. Annie is my 11-year-old daughter, for those of you that don't know, and beautiful girl, dark brown hair. And we actually homeschool her and her sister. And she came to me, she just had been struggling with math. I know she knows it. I don't know, as parents, you can tell when your kids get it, but they're either careless about something, they miss something, whatever. And she's just barely off the mark all the time. Maybe she misses 2 on this test, 3, whatever. And, I was thinking back to that time when I was playing baseball, and what my dad told me. I said, Annie, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to, before you take this test, I want you to look at the test and I want you to close your eyes. Can you see the test? Can you see the paper in your mind? I said, now at the top of that page, I want you to envision that there's 100 written on it. And I said, now what's that 100 going to look like? Now, I always draw like a cool picture. like a face if they get 100, like some goofy face with teeth and the tongue hanging out and all this stuff. So she's like, oh yeah, I know what it looks like. I said, okay, that's what you're going to get on this test. I want you to believe that. I want you to see it before you start taking this test. And you know what? Sure enough, she opened her eyes. She took the test. She got 100. And
just confidence.
I mean, you can't deny this, right? You can't deny the stuff that Weldon's talking about in his book. So I hope this has been helpful to others. I know it has been for me and you, obviously. And go get the book.
Yeah, I mean, we're not a self-help show, but I will say that this book is one of those that us as entrepreneurs, we need. We need this, and I think it's timely. So I'm glad that you thought of bringing this to our audience because it is one that we're going to get a lot out of it. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to us, and
go to the show notes.
And make sure you download that Roles and Goals guide. And also click the link.
Book.
Yeah, click the link. Order the book. And if you know Weldon Long, say...
Tell them to call us.
Wealth Without Wall Street.
Russ, this was episode 19 of the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. And I don't know about you, but I am more inspired now to be consistent in 2018.
Absolutely. And I want to be consistent also this year in teaching our kids about money. And if you're as interested about that as I am, wait till this next episode, Joey. We're going to be interviewing Connor Boyack.
Yeah, he is such a great author of children's books. The Tuttle Twin series, I've been going over those with my girls. They cannot get enough of this stuff.
Yeah, we've gone through every single one of them. And if you want to know what we're talking about, take a little bit of a listen in to next week's episode with Connor Boyack.
And I'll just add, my experience with The Creature from Jekyll Island specifically is the relief it was to be able to have you simplify the idea of inflation in a book like that for our kids. I mean, I think a lot of parents, even that do know these things, are having a hard time figuring out how to explain it in a way. And you've just really done a great job of putting it in terms and, applications that they can understand. So that definitely, that was a big win for me going through that book with my kids last year and even again recently. So
your guys' experience is shared by that of many other parents we hear from where they say, oh yeah, we read your book, 3 weeks ago, and today we were in the car and we heard something on the radio, and my kid pipes up from the backseat, oh, that's just like we read in the Tuttle Twins book, and just having that foundation or having that context makes things a lot more relevant to the child who hears about it later. They have a point of reference in a way that speaks to them.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.